Imagine the scene, 6 in the morning on a Tuesday, and I'm watching some hired hand from the HOA take a power saw to my main waterline. The shriek of the blade against the pipe was a sound that didn't belong here, echoing across the still lake. A shower of sparks sprayed onto my gravel drive, while a man in an ill-fitting suit filmed the entire spectacle, documenting it like a trophy kill. It was in that exact moment I knew Veronica Brightwell, our HOA president and a walking, talking migraine, had just made the gravest miscalculation of her tenure. You see, I'm Garrett Thornfield. I dedicated 40 years of my life to designing the water infrastructure for this entire county. My only goal in retirement was to find some quiet in my lakefront cabin, the very place I said goodbye to my wife Martha, scattering her ashes into the water. But Veronica had decided my weathered cabin was an eyesore that tarnished her vision of opulent lakeside living. What she didn't grasp was that every single drop of water that filled her $500,000 tub had to travel through pipes that were, by law, under my control. Before you suggest a lawsuit, believe me, I had a plan, far more gratifying than a simple court battle. Let me rewind and explain how this whole nightmare began. Just 3 months prior, my retirement was everything I'd dreamed of. Each morning, but began with a walk to my dock, a hot mug of coffee in hand, inhaling the scent of damp earth and pine, a fragrance no amount of money can replicate. The crunch of my boots on the gravel and the sight of the cedar siding, peeling but full of memories, was my reality. This wasn't a luxury estate, it was home. Martha and I discovered this 1960s cabin on our final anniversary trip. She was instantly captivated by the mournful call of the loons at sunrise, and the way the fog performed its slow dance across the water's surface. After 4 decades of managing Clearbrook County's municipal water systems, designing its major pipelines, and solving pressure issues that baffled younger engineers, I felt I'd earned this tranquility. Martha succumbed to cancer 2 years ago. I released her ashes from that dock on a morning identical to the ones we had cherished throughout 37 years of marriage. The cabin was meant to be our shared haven. After her passing, it became my anchor to sanity. Then came Veronica Brightwell. Conjure the most self-important person you can imagine, amplify that tenfold, and then arm them with a law degree in an $800,000 McMansion on the lake. That was Veronica. She piloted a white BMW that she consistently parked across 2 spots and dressed for a courtroom appearance, even to fetch her mail. And her clipboard, good lord, she wielded that clipboard like it was a sacred text. For 8 years, she had ruled the Whisper Lake Estates HOA as her own private kingdom. The 12 board members were less a governing body and more a royal court, there only to rubber stamp her latest decree. I first witnessed her in her element at a neighborhood barbecue. A homeowner's sprinkler was overshooting his lawn and watering the pavement, a simple mistake. Veronica marched over, clipboard in hand, and wrote him a citation on the spot, announcing to the entire gathering that property standards were not optional. I should have recognized then that I would eventually end up in her sights. The real conflict began at my first, and what I intended to be my only, HOA meeting. I thought it was the neighborly thing to do. It turned out to be the worst decision of my retirement. The second I stepped into the community center, Veronica's gaze fixed on me like a predator spotting its prey. "Oh," she declared, her voice dripping with scorn. "You must be the gentleman from the rustic cabin." She pronounced rustic as if it were a synonym for criminal enterprise. The meeting was a masterclass in micromanagement from a control freak. We endured 45 minutes on the regulation height of mailboxes, followed by 20 minutes on how unauthorized bird feeders were attracting undesirable wildlife. Then, the moment that set everything in motion, "We must address water usage compliance," Veronica proclaimed, producing a binder that looked official but felt entirely fabricated. Properties constructed before 1985 must limit consumption to 200 gallons. This is vital to protect our community aquifer. Her eyes bored into mine from across the room. Certain residents are utilizing well water and direct lake access, a dual violation of our conservation covenant. Having spent my career in water management, I knew that developers often write HOA rules in ignorance of actual water laws. Grandfathered properties are typically exempt from covenants they never signed. But before I could articulate this legal fact, she had moved on. After the meeting, she cornered me. "Mr. Thornfield," she began, her tone saturated with fake concern, "I trust you'll bring your usage into compliance voluntarily. It would be a shame if we were forced to take decisive action." 2 weeks later, a certified letter arrived, $5,000 in fines for water violations, approved by an emergency board vote that broke every procedural rule. I had 30 days to pay and install their monitoring equipment, or they would shut off my utilities. That's when it became clear this crusade had nothing to do with conservation. It was about absolute power, a campaign to purge anyone who didn't conform to Veronica Brightwell's sterile vision of perfection. She had just picked a fight with the wrong retired engineer. You know what they say about poking a hornet's nest? Well, Veronica was about to learn a lesson in applied hydrology from a man with nothing but time on his hands and 40 years of expertise. Her first major move came precisely 2 weeks after that letter. I was on the dock at sunrise. the steam from my coffee mingling with the lake mist when the growl of diesel engines shattered the peace. 3 trucks rolled down my driveway at 7 a.m. on the dot. Veronica apparently subscribed to psychological warfare via early morning disturbances. 2 men in branded polo shirts emerged, followed by Veronica, who stepped out of her BMW like a general arriving to command a siege. "Mr. Thornfield," she called out, her voice oozing that false sweetness people use right before they dismantle your day. "These are certified compliance inspectors. We are here to install monitoring equipment on your well." I walked toward her, mug still in hand. "Morning, Veronica, you have a warrant for that." She produced a laminated document. The woman laminated everything. "The HOA covenant grants access for utilities inspection. This is all perfectly legal." I had memorized that covenant. The document she was brandishing held about as much legal weight as a cocktail napkin. But her men were already marching toward my well house with power tools. For the next hour I was treated to the cacophony of drilling as these amateurs installed meters on machinery they didn't comprehend. One of them actually asked me where the water came out. I'd spent a career cleaning up messes made by this exact brand of incompetence. While they fumbled with my equipment, my neighbor Hazel Murphy came over carrying a thermos. "She's done this before," Hazel whispered, nodding toward Veronica. "Remember the Kowalski's nice family?" Veronica ran the same playbook on them: bogus fines, constant harassment, until they finally sold cheap. The pattern was unmistakable. This wasn't random tyranny. It was a systematic campaign to gentrify the lakefront, one rustic property at a time. But this is where Veronica made a critical error. That afternoon, I drove to the county courthouse and immersed myself in property records. What I discovered was elegantly simple. The Whisper Lake Estates HOA was formed in 1987. My cabin was built in 1963, according to state law. My property was grandfathered in and could not be retroactively subjected to covenants I never agreed to. Her entire legal case was a house of cards. That evening, I drafted a letter citing the relevant statutes and case law: professional, polite, and legally irrefutable. I demanded the immediate removal of her equipment and a halt to all harassment. The next morning, I delivered copies via certified mail to every board member, the county water authority, and Veronica's law firm. Proper documentation is a lesson you learn quickly in government work. Veronica's response was swift. Instead of conceding, she escalated, claiming my well was depleting the community aquifer and threatening to file environmental complaints. She was playing checkers, oblivious to the fact that I was setting up a game of chess she didn't even know was being played. This wasn't going to be resolved with letters. Veronica Brightwell had declared war. It was time to show her what, for decades of water system expertise, properly motivated, could achieve. It. Veronica thought I would fold after her groundwater theft accusation. She was about to discover that retired engineers don't just retreat. We counterattack with overwhelming force. Her next gambit was a masterclass in small-town political maneuvering. While I was away for a week visiting my sick brother, she called an emergency community meeting to address the water thieves endangering the neighborhood. I learned about it from Hazel, who called me in the hospital waiting room. "Garrett, honey," she said, "she's got half the neighborhood convinced you're some kind of eco-terrorist." Veronica had launched a full-scale propaganda war, printing flyers with my old photo from the county website, claiming I was draining the aquifer while good families faced dry wells. It was utter nonsense, but dangerously effective. Her crucial mistake. She scheduled the meeting for a Thursday. I returned home on Wednesday. That evening I walked into the packed community center armed with my laptop, a projector, and 40 years of county water data. Veronica was mid-sentence, pontificating about selfish individuals threatening our children's water supply. When I cleared my throat, "Sorry I'm late," I announced. "Mind if I add some technical clarity to this discussion?" The blood drained from her face as she stammered about meeting protocol. I set up my projector. My first slide displayed 40 years of aquifer data, proving the water table was stable and that my one-man cabin used far less water than the average household. "Ms. Brightwell claims I'm depleting the groundwater," I stated, clicking to the next slide. "But my artesian well draws from a different water table than the municipal supply. They aren't connected. It's basic geology." The mood in the room shifted from suspicion to confusion, then to outright anger as people realized they had been manipulated. Then, Frank Kowalski, the man Hazel had told me about, stood up. "She did the same damn thing to us," he boomed, pointing at Veronica. "Lies and harassment until we sold our home for half its value." One by one, others stood up. The Hendersons spoke of being threatened over their vegetable garden. A young couple revealed fines for their work van. A disabled veteran named Carlos described her attempts to ban his service dog. The pattern was undeniable. Veronica targeted anyone who didn't fit her vision of a luxury enclave. Losing control, Veronica snapped. "This is about maintaining property standards. Some people simply don't belong here." The room erupted. As chaos reigned, I saw Janet Rodriguez from the County Water Authority slip in. We'd worked together for years. Later in the parking lot, she told me, "Garrett, you should know. We've been building a harassment case against her for 3 years based on her false complaints. The game had changed. Cornered, Veronica went nuclear. Legal papers were taped to my door. She was suing for an immediate injunction to shut off my water, claiming my septic system was contaminating the very aquifer she'd accused me of draining. The local paper ran a front-page story painting me as an environmental villain. It was a masterpiece of misinformation. Instead of hiring a lawyer, I represented myself. My response was simple. If she was claiming contamination, she could prove it with scientific testing at her expense. The tests took 2 weeks and cost her $8,000. The results were beautiful. My property was pristine and a delicious twist of cosmic justice. The tests revealed that her septic system had minor violations and had been slowly leaching into the lake. But the survey required for the testing unearthed the true jackpot. Original 1963 deed for my cabin included an easement I'd long forgotten, granting perpetual access and maintenance authority over water infrastructure. Back when the lake was developed, the main water line from the county was routed straight through my property. The rights to control that infrastructure had transferred with the deed. For decades, I had unknowingly held legal control over the water supply to her entire precious HOA. While I was processing this, the community rallied. Hazel organized a fundraiser. Frank shared his story publicly, but Veronica wasn't done. She stooped to spreading rumors that grief had made me mentally unstable, even suggesting Martha would be ashamed of me. That was the line. Until then, I had been on defense. Dishonoring my wife's memory made it personal. It was time to go on offense. The moment of clarity arrived at 2 a.m. surrounded by old survey maps. There it was. The main water line, serving all 47 homes in Whisper Lake Estates, including Veronica's, ran directly through my property, under an easement I controlled. The irony was breathtaking. She had spent months threatening to cut off my water when I held the legal authority to turn her entire neighborhood into a desert. Utility easements grant immense power, a fact most people overlook, but I wasn't a bully. Power without responsibility is just tyranny. I wouldn't shut them off out of spite. I would use this leverage strategically. As the sun rose, I folded the maps and smiled. It was time to teach Veronica a lesson in respect. An engineer never acts without a plan. My first call was to Janet Rodriguez at the County Water Authority. We met at a local diner. When I spread the easement documents on the table, her eyes went wide. "Sweet mother of pearl," she whispered, "you control their entire water supply." We spent 2 hours plotting. State law allowed me, as the easement holder, to invoke emergency maintenance protocols, which meant I could legally restrict water access for inspections. Janet pledged the county's official backing. Next, I recruited Frank Kowalski for intelligence and community organizing. Hazel Murphy became our communications hub, using her neighborhood gossip network to our advantage. Dave from the local hardware store, a former municipal engineer himself, provided technical support. Our plan was simple. We would use legitimate maintenance procedures to demonstrate who truly held power. We spent 3 weeks preparing flawless documentation. Psychologically, we decided to let Veronica believe she was winning. Frank and Hazel spread rumors that I was defeated and looking to sell. Veronica swallowed the bait whole. She called an emergency HOA meeting to publicly formalize my surrender, inviting county officials and the local media to witness her triumph. The harassment intensified. My phone line was cut, and a code enforcement officer was sent to my home on a bogus complaint. He found nothing and apologized for the waste of time. Veronica meanwhile circulated a press release announcing her victory. She was so convinced she had won that she was already writing the history. Thursday evening, I walked into the community center looking every bit the defeated old man she expected. The room was packed. Veronica had a locksmith and a water technician on standby. She delivered a triumphant speech about community standards and gestured for her technician to proceed with physically disconnecting my water service in front of everyone. "Any final comments before we proceed?" she asked, her voice dripping with victory. I stood slowly. "Well," I said softly, "there is one small technical detail we should probably discuss." I opened my briefcase and laid out the laminated survey, maps, and official county documents. "Has anyone here actually checked who controls the water line you're threatening to shut off?" I asked, my voice suddenly firm. "According to county records filed in 1963, I hold perpetual easement rights over the main water lines serving this entire neighborhood." You could have heard a pin drop. "You've spent